Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Radnor Township School District Finance Committee meeting for Tuesday, August 14th. I know we're getting started a little late. Curriculum ran late. Policy
ran later.
Just a couple of minutes. We were pretty quick, but on policy. But anyway, let's get right underway with administrative remarks from either Ms. Dekow or Mr. Stitzel.
I have none.
You got nothing. Great. We're going to run right into public comment.
You want to talk about your summer and how that's been? Big exposition.
Hopefully, Mrs. Sherry, you had a chance to sign in. Welcome. Great.
Yes, I'm signed in.
Great. And again, I went paperless, so this is the reason I have a display in front of my face.
Previous question about funding sports, specifically, why is ice hockey, a varsity sport and an expensive sport, so underfunded compared to football, soccer, lacrosse, etc.? Number two, what was the total in hours and cost of hiring the Fox Rothschild law firm to investigate a school board member? Number three, I asked a question previously if the board found the work of the CAC helpful, and will the CAC continue to be endorsed as a committee? And I listened to the report on 690 and 694 Roberts Road's properties. According to the representatives of the CAC, Jack Coyle's appraisal reports stated that the two Roberts Road properties were close to the end of a useful life and deteriorating with not the proper upkeep. These houses are going to require some significant expenditures for maintenance at some point soon. The school district's mission is clearly not in the real estate investment market. Can a district own rental properties? This was asked, actually, for investment purposes. The district has no public plans for using these properties. There was one board member who cited the Stonehenge controversy in Lower Merion as a reason to consider keeping property. But Stoneleigh, I'm sorry. Thank you for that correction. Yeah, sorry. No, Stoneleigh is right. Stonehenge I was thinking of. Thank you. After the sale of these properties, there's still 55 acres, approximately, at Ithan. So, and there's an access road to get onto that property from another location. So there's plenty of space for expansion should the board feel that there's a need there. Almost 20 years ago, these properties were bought specifically for an entrance to a middle school. The middle school was built in Wayne. The idea of developing another school on this site with an entrance and exit on Sproul Road was shown to create a traffic nightmare. There already, and I didn't hear anyone mention traffic, but there already is a pretty big nightmare on Sproul Road with the traffic backed up endlessly during rush hour when schools are in session. So my suggestion is that you consider getting some quotes from realtors about the value of the properties. Take the money from the sale, the new annual taxes that will occur from selling that property, and the elimination of liability, and use the income for investing in curriculum that benefits students. And on another note, Ithan has the smallest enrollment of the elementary schools, but is offering the most school clubs, 19. Radnor is offering 14, and Wayne is offering 15. Does the district monitor these opportunities in terms of equity between the three elementary schools? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sherzana. I see no other public, so I think we're going to move right into approval of the minutes. Did everyone have a chance to review them? Do you have any concerns, comments on the June 5th Finance Committee meeting minutes?
I did review them, and I just had one question, and I tried to ask Mike, and we weren't entirely clear. There's the answer to Well,
Sure.
so the answer to question number 7 was that Dr. Rabarchuk and Dr. Boylan are currently conducting the enrollment and building capacity review, and says it's going to be presented to the Facilities Committee in March. I thought it was presented recently, and I think they're going to do an update, but I thought it was coming before March, so I just didn't know if that timing was right.
Yeah, I don't think,
So,
Right, I don't think it's March.
let me
but
assist you with
is
that.
it not, it's facilities, just facilities is going to.
No, hang on, let me assist you with that. I think that Ms. Deco, I think I'm going to be able to help. So if everyone recalls, Ms. Deco was out for a number of months.
Right.
And her questions, which there were many administrative remarks in June, they reflected several months' worth of questions. So I
it was
think
March
the
18.
wording of the timing of that question actually is that she answered it from, it had been like a January
was
or
from-
February question. And they just, all of her questions were answered together in June because you had been out. You know, Michelle, please feel free to jump in if I'm misspeaking, but I think that that's the reason that reads.
And I thought that might be it, but I didn't want to assume
Yeah,
that
no.
and just say corrected. I wanted to make sure there wasn't something.
No, it was not,
Okay.
it's not incorrect, it's just that it reflects many months' worth of questions because she had been out.
Okay.
And there was a review of the elementary school utilization at a facilities committee meeting. I think we all reflected it. There were 2 different meetings, so,
and there-
yes, there's
and there
been.
is comeback.
And there will be one in,
Questions, yes, there's more coming to that.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's accurate in terms of what was said. And with that, great. So we're going to approve the minutes. And with that, let's just jump right into our agenda. So our first action item is, we have some, these will be on the, action items to be on the full board meeting. There's a number of items to be sold, donated, or disposed. We have some approval of contracts. I actually have a question about one of those, Michelle. And then with regard to the approval of the PTO-sponsored activities, I know I have a question, but I'm going to hold off and see if anyone else has other questions on the approvals here. You're good, Mike?
I had one, and I just wanted, the Moncito Inc., this is website management of the district website?
That's correct. It's software that Michael Petiti has been speaking with the Government Relations Committee
Okay.
about.
Yep.
It helps us monitor our website to make sure that it's,
I'm on the GRCC, so you
Okay.
don't have to explain the rest of it to me. I remember that. So I just wanted to make sure that I knew which website management
it's
it was.
ADA
Okay.
compliant.
Yep, perfect, thank you.
Oh, it's that one?
Yep.
Great, okay. So my question about the approval of contracts just has to do with CCRES. We don't have a not to exceed there. Do you have a ballpark of, it says based on usage, but do we have any idea of what that might cost, what we've paid in the past, anything?
We don't know an idea because we don't know what we're going to need. Typically, we would use CCRES for a special ed teacher that we may not be able to find if someone resigns or gets ill. That's kind of our pinch hitter for special ed. So we don't have a specific number because we don't know if anyone is going to get ill or go on leave this year. But typically, they would pay, they look at what we typically pay our people and they charge us 10% more.
Okay, I think the only reason I'm
Finding.
confused is that this is actually for the consultant. The way that this reads, this approval of contracts, do we call the special ed teachers who we bring in educational consultants? Or is this the person, is this Mike Thompson who's been helping us with the 339? That's really my question.
Well, it's also through special ed, the special ed department, so I don't know how Kevin is handling that, but the agreement, it will be all in one. That
Okay.
HR and special ed will kind of have the same agreement with the wording that can handle both of us, but I don't know the special ed
Okay.
part of it.
So I guess my request for the board meeting is is at least if you could have some clarity around that, maybe you'll have a chance to ask Kevin.
Yeah, I can ask Kevin, and I'll try to find out his, but from an HR point of view, I can't give you a number because I don't know.
For the teachers, that
If we're
makes
gonna-
sense. For this reads as though it's the educational consultant portion. So
Yeah,
if we could just
I'll
get.
talk to Kevin tomorrow.
Even if it's what we've paid kind of ballpark in the past for that portion of it. So that would be great. And then with regard to the PTO list, I was actually, it's my understanding that these are managed by the PTO. So if various PTOs survey their community, they know, they've got their base of volunteers, and so the disparity in the number of clubs, I'm not sure this is something we can control, how parent volunteers are going to volunteer. That being said, I do have a question about the 3 troops at Ithan, the Girl Scout, the Brownie troop, 2 Brownie troops, and a Daisy troop. I can speak to Boy Scouts. Those are not usually chartered by a school. They're usually chartered by an outside organization. is our PTO chartering the Girl Scout troops? I'm surprised to see them on this list. But Girl Scouts might be, kind of, the structure of their organization might be different from Boy Scouts.
Oh, it's much different, I can tell you that.
I-
Because
I-
I was a Boy Scout and I had 2 girls that went through that
Okay.
at West, but it's, each grade level is like a different troop for the,
So it's not
Brownies are the
unusual to
Girl
have them run through
Scouts.
PTOs?
yeah, for some reason, this goes back because my kids are now out of that, but, you know, and have been for a while, but it was an after-school club through West
this-
PTO for some
Okay.
reason, and each grade level is a different troop number.
So you know what I'm talking about, though, how
That
like
was weird.
Boy Scouts is like.
No, Boy Scouts is 284, yeah, and is the
Yeah, it's
church and all, yeah.
the church and St. Catherine's, so it's
Yeah, and
not, it's
Paley
an outside
One is
order.
their own
Okay.
little
All
military
right, so then
thing,
that's
yeah.
just parents are doing that, great.
Yeah.
Is my understanding of our various groups different from what I just said, though? We have kind of no control over what the parents are going to choose to run and organize for themselves.
I would agree with that statement. There are sometimes opportunities for students from one elementary school to go to a club at another elementary school.
Okay, so that was going to be,
So that happens occasionally. I would say that's not the norm, but it does happen on occasion, especially if a parent is starting up a new club and they know through the PTO that other buildings would have interest in that club as well.
okay, so there is some opportunity to create, if there's disparity, to kind of even that out a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, great. Is everyone okay with this otherwise? All righty, great. With regard to Roberts Road, so Michelle, do you want to just go over that a little bit?
Surely. So a while back, there was a question about whether or not the district could own properties for rental purposes, and Mrs. Booker had asked me to look into that, and we were able to get an opinion from our solicitor that, yes, indeed, that we can own properties. There's nothing that limits us from owning those properties and renting them out. One of the things he did suggest is that the rental rates be approved by the board when they change, and that that we ratify those rates. So that's why this is on the agenda, to ratify the rental rates for 690 and 694 South Roberts Roads. You can see all the information that's there. The property at 694 will go through June 30th of 2019, so we'll come back to the board and ask to have that approved sometime before that June meeting. I know that Mrs. Sherry mentioned that the reports indicated that those properties were approaching the end of their useful life. That information was brought to us by the CAC. I think I've been pretty vocal at meetings saying that one of those properties is in worse condition than the other and will need additional repairs. One of the properties is in relatively good condition. Mr. Stitzel's been working on some repairs at one of those properties, and I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, I had the maintenance and I walked through one of the properties about 3 weeks ago, and there's some things that we're going to need to address. We will be putting another roof on there either this fall or early spring of one of the properties. And we actually have 2 of our maintenance gentlemen were previous roofers, so we will actually have them do the roof work.
Great. So that should help save some money. That's actually was my recollection, is that they were saying the roofs were at the end of their useful life. I don't know that we ever refer to houses as being at the end of their useful life, but I did recall the roof conversation from the CAC presentation. Okay.
Can I just ask for clarification? Are we ratifying the existing rental rates, or is this a change to the rental rates that are currently in place?
This is the current rental rates that are in place.
Okay.
The last time I think this was approved was, I'm going to look at Jackie, I think it was in 2013 or 2014 was the last time this was approved. So this is getting us back in line with what we should have been doing and actually had not been.
So just to be clear about that, because when Michelle and I went over this, these are the new rates. They started July 1st.
Okay, so
Or
that was my
They started
question.
fairly recently, wasn't it?
The one for 694 started when that tenant moved into that parcel.
Okay.
I can look to see exactly when that was.
And it had been a-
690 was when that person moved into that rental. 690 was vacant for a period of time. We did some work to 690 and then rented it out. That's the one that's on a month-to-month lease. So that rent will not go up unless we decide that we want to increase it. The property at Roberts Road, 694, that is on a July 1 to June 30th lease.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think they each went up like either $40 or $50 per month.
$20 per month.
Oh, you know, I have these written backwards. So it went from 1610 to 1630, and then I thought you told me it had been 1580. Well, neither here nor there. It was fairly nominal increases.
No,
Fairly
that's fine.
nominal increase.
Yeah, but a slight increase, yes. Okay, great.
The rent is too damn high. No, just kidding.
And then the next item, the supplemental changes.
So we've had some requests for some changes to supplemental. The first one that you see there, supplementals had been reviewed by this committee on several occasions, educational supplementals as well as sports supplementals. So the high school is asking that the student activities school life coordinator be increased by $600. That recommendation is based on the number of actual hours that individual spent working on the student activities school life activities, and Mr. Bechtold is asking that be increased. Dr. McQuiggan is asking for a new supplemental for the Sea Perch Club. Sea Perch has expanded. We've been paying that on an hourly basis as opposed to a supplemental. So we're asking for a supplemental that's in line with all of the other supplementals for the same type of activities. And then Mr. Bechtel is asking that the high school service board be renamed to Radnor Ambassadors. And also, Dr. McQuiggan is also requesting an English language learners coordinator. That's a new supplemental. It had previously been paid on hourly, and I'm sorry, Sea Perch was voluntary. I got those two mixed up.
Okay. Is there any questions? Oh, you know what, so just to clarify, because when we did the supplemental work a few years ago, one of the pieces, just so you know, that got cleaned up is that all of these supplementals, there had been a request that we have job descriptions. And so one of the things I asked Michelle, I said, all right, well, if we're going to start paying supplementals, do they have job descriptions that clearly outline the scope? And yes, they do. Yes, great. So that's, you know, we're trying to stay on top of that with all the supplemental requests.
Can I ask, just so I understand, is there a savings to the district in going to a supplemental? Does it just kind of create clarity for both the teacher or the person providing the service and the district? Kind of a cap or?
Go ahead, I'll jump in.
So one of the advantages for going to a supplemental is it keeps everybody who has the same type of job duties, whether it's an EL coordinator or a first grade chairperson or something like that. They have basically the same type of responsibilities. It also makes them all have the same pay.
Okay.
And we found that it's actually less expensive to do a supplemental than it is to pay people by the hour to do their work. Some people would say that perhaps that means that the supplemental isn't high enough because it's based on 100 hours at $23.09 per hour. You could also argue that if someone's getting paid by the hour, they may take their time to do the tasks. So you can argue that both ways.
We went for consistency, and there was a lot of
No, that's
work.
fine.
No, I'm just letting you know, there was a lot of work put into a really arms and legs of that study, and this is the system we're utilizing. And so when I think ultimately what you guys kind of came up with is that when somebody starts to do a new little job, yes, we pay them hourly. When it becomes clear it is going to be a regular gig, and one that the board supports and the district supports, you move over the supplemental
Okay.
The supplemental process. And then in the case of so for instance, with the student activities school life coordinator, you know, if the administration in the building, for instance, Dan, is able to see on an ongoing basis, you know what, that particular group, that particular job is more hours than what had been indicated, he makes a discretionary, you know, he makes an evaluation and comes to us and we say yes or no. So
Yep.
it just was really all about streamlining the process and getting some consistency around what had been a very inconsistent situation.
Okay.
Is that
Thank
an
you.
accurate statement, Mrs. Decal?
Yes.
That took a lot of hours of time.
It took a year.
It took more than, yeah,
More
kind of
than
it
a
did,
year.
more than a year, right.
And lots of meetings.
Great, so good, a really nice, quick meeting here. Does anyone have any new business?
All kinds of questions about something.
I'm sure you do. I do want to reference back, we actually had a question, I think it was brought up in, maybe in policy, or maybe it was the beginning of the finance, and there's been a lot of conversation and questions this year about how is field trips getting funded, how are field trips getting funded, how are field trips getting funded? And I think we're going to look in the fall to give a little bit more of an in-depth answer, but I do want to answer quickly, because Michelle and I had this conversation. Most of the field trips that occur in this district are actually paid for by parents. Now, you know, there are some trips that we do some cost sharing. Canadensis comes to mind, maybe Sandy Hill. Sandy Hill. But the vast majority of the field trips that occur in the district, the parents are paying for it. So there's not, for the amount of time that it would take to do this work, we're not talking about a lot of district dollars. Doesn't mean a lot of money isn't spent, but it's not district dollars. And I think that as we, as a committee, talk about committee goals, you know, we'll have to give some thought to, you know, is that how we would want the administration spending a lot of time coming up with how are field trips funded when in whole dollars? It's not a lot of, we have the resource called time, and Michelle's time, Ken's time, other administrators' time. Correct, and in conjunction with our board goals, you know, then circling back around to the CAC, coming up with if there are things that would be of value for them to take a look at in conjunction with Michelle and board goals. So, you know, we're not ignoring the questions. We are going to queue those conversations up after the board does its district goals, which we are planning to do, I think, in shortly, August, right, Ken? So I don't want people to feel left that we're ignoring the questions. You know, the process will be district goals for the year, queue up and see if there's some things for CAC that would be of value. Our finance committee needs to talk about what would be of value to us. Patty's not here tonight. She's an important part of that conversation. So it will come. All right?
And I think there was also a question tonight about the funding of sports, and I've previously said at prior meetings that it's something that we're aware of. We know that we need to look at how those things are funded. We're going to need some time to do that, but we are going to address it. So that's already been spoken about. And in terms of the Fox Rothschild, I think Mrs. Stern, you addressed that many months ago by saying it's a personnel matter, and we weren't going to comment anymore on it at this time unless there was new information to report.
Yes, and we will need to, you know, continue to get clarity on that. Regarding the sports funding, thank you for I want to just tell people, if you read the minutes, the way the minutes read, there's an indication that we are going to come up with a process for funding sports this year, and it would be more accurate to say, and that is what Michelle said, but I think it would be more accurate to say the district is going to look at coming up with a process for evaluating how sports funding is done. There is no way that the work of understanding how sports are funded and do we want to make changes to it could occur in time for the 1920 funding, the 1920 budget process. That starts in December. So
September.
September, there you go. For me, it starts in December. When the booklet comes to me is when it starts.
And you've been thinking about it for months already.
So, you know.
Took one day off from after the final budget vote,
right.
and then the next year starts.
Pretty much. And, you know, what we learned with supplementals is that you have to kind of get in there and understand what you don't know, you don't even know, before you can begin to think about the way to approach such a big conversation. So,
and it
again,
also needs to involve middle school as well as high school. It seems
correct.
A lot of focus has been put on the high school sports, but we do have a lot of sports activities at the middle school, and we need to look at those as well.
Right. Okay, so just kind of took a few minutes to tidy up some of those comments. With that, if you don't have new business, Mike? No. Sarah, great. I will take public comment.
My first question would be, how do parents know about club options offered throughout the district in elementary schools, and also that they can participate in these opportunities? So I learned tonight that, you know, if you're in one elementary school, you can participate in a club in another elementary school, and I wondered how that information is conveyed to parents, because that would create a more equitable situation. And I appreciate the fact that each school may have certain talents within its borders that, you know, may not be available in other schools, other elementary schools. If our maintenance men will be doing the roofs on the private homes that we own, there is a cost to that, because then they're not doing maintenance on our school buildings. And if they're not needed for school-related maintenance, then maybe the district, or should the district, be looking at its personnel requirements. So that's my question about that. And I'm back to also asking, related to the booster clubs, if they do not comply with the district's request for giving their financial information to the district for things like the Title IX report, what's the consequence to the booster club? Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, I'm going to say that our meeting's adjourned. Good night.